Okay, shukran jazilan lahadurakum. Thank you everybody for coming. And let me know if they cannot hear me in the back. Okay, we're going to assume they can hear me. Louder, okay. Sorry, is this working okay?
I think it is, but you've...
Okay, projecting. So we have with us this evening somebody who really does need no introduction, so I'm going to keep it brief. Qubad Talabani, former Deputy Prime Minister of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, former Kurdish representative to Washington, someone who is certain to have a role in the new Kurdish government. We're not sure what yet, but maybe we can talk about that. I followed you a little bit on your campaign, on the campaign trail in May. And it was really interesting seeing you doing kind of a new style of campaigning, but still in an old system. So perhaps a little bit of context. Is there anything more complicated than Kurdish politics? I mean, over the past, let's start at 2003 when it all turned over. We've seen parties come and go, we've seen people defect, we've seen them come back together, we've seen conflicts of lots of kinds. I wonder if you could tell us, what do you think has been a constant in Kurdish politics and what has changed?
Well, thank you very much, Masa al-Khair. Thank you for the Center for Dialogue for Rafidain for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. There is one thing more complicated than Kurdish politics, and that's Iraqi politics. That's the only thing that's more complicated than Kurdish politics is Iraqi politics, but only because there are more parties, multiple more parties, and increasing number of parties, and as the Sheikh said, alliances that are forming along different beliefs. But Kurdistan has changed, but the more it changes, the more it sometimes seems the same. We've seen in the last 10 years a rise in populism, rise in anti-government sentiment, and greater freedoms to express resentment, to express disappointment. We've seen a whole political movement emerge as an opposition movement. Unfortunately, it broke from my political party, Goran movement, and it gained momentum. So it's interesting because I see populism in Europe, in the United States. I see it emerging now, but we've been tackling populism in Kurdistan for well over 10 years. And the election results, the ones that you witnessed, sent us a message that actually people got fed up of just complaining. That people got fed up of the political parties, that all they did was say, he is bad, he's corrupt, he's got to go, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that. People now want governance. And one of the biggest challenges that the new government of Iraq is going to face, and the next government of Kurdistan is going to face, is the expectation of the public for better governance. And that, I think, is a good challenge, because for far too long we have been discussing the big strategic issues, regional issues, neighbors, America, East, West, Sunni, Shi'i, Kurdi, Masihi, Shu'i, Islami. All of this has been discussed ad nauseum. But what has not been discussed, what has not been debated, what has not been argued is governance. Fine, for the last 4 years, the government of Iraq and Kurdistan, we were at war, against terrorism. So it was easy to say, I can't do this now because I'm at war. But that excuse is gone. And we're seeing people in Basra, we're seeing people in Baghdad, we're seeing people in Erbil and Slaymaniyah saying, hey, where's my electricity? Where's my water? Where's my services? And that, I think, is the challenge facing Iraq and Kurdistan today and tomorrow.
So we're seeing those a lot. You're right. We're seeing them in Basra. We're seeing them in Sulaymaniyah. We're seeing them everywhere. And the response seems to be these protesters get put in jail. They occasionally, a senior official comes and says nice things, and nothing seems to happen. So I'm kind of wondering, well, there are two questions here, sorry. One is, I wonder if you still have a chance to bring that good governance to the table, because in talking to people in the elections, and the election in Iraq, and the election in the Kurdistan region, there were so many people who said they would not vote because it didn't do any good. What can you actually do to bring back that promise that this country has, that your region has?
The only thing we can do, and the only thing we must do, is govern. Forget the politics. And all I've heard in the last 2 days here is, who's going to be the Kurdish Minister of Justice? It's not a problem. That's not the problem facing Iraq, who the Kurdish Minister of Justice is. Is he KDP? Is he PUK? Is he independent? Is he close to this? I have the discussion I haven't heard is, how are we going to fix the governance issues? Now, we in Kurdistan in the last 4 years, we've tried to address some of the governance issues. We've started some serious reforms in the public sector, in eliminating ghost employees, in making transparent our oil and gas sector, in reforming how we hire, in reorganizing and restructuring the government. And it's a start, but we have a very long way to go. And the next government in Erbil needs to continue this. And I think there is so many similarities between what's wrong with the system here and what's wrong with the system in Erbil.
So you have something in common.
We have
That's
a lot
great.
in common. We have a lot in common, and events like this can actually help bring people together, discuss what some of the challenges are, even come up with some of the solutions for these challenges. So I am actually, for the first time in a long time, I'm actually optimistic. Because one, the bar is pretty low. Two, it won't take too much to improve electricity, water, the effectiveness of the government, the responsiveness of the government. Now, demonstrations may be something relatively new here. In Baghdad, in Basra, we saw the events, and there was a little shock to the system, but they're not new to us. We've had a decade or so of demonstrations of civil unrest, and there has been response. But the response today has to be different to the response of yesteryear. The response of previous years is, people are unhappy, let's have the government hire more people. People are unhappy, let's increase salaries. People are unhappy, let's increase mukhassasat, the allowances. Let's find a way to make people happy by giving them some sort of bonus. This system failed. Iraq's government is way too big. The Kurdistan regional government is way too big. We cannot fix problems by just throwing money at problems. And so I think this is what's changed in terms of the response to the civil unrest. I hope that Iraq as a government can implement a real reform with real austerity, because sometimes you need to cut spending and redirect spending on strategic areas, not just in handing out salaries and allowances.
Why is it taking so long to put the Kurdistan region government together?
Last time it took us 9 to 10 months, so we're still ahead of the last one, which is not really a good barometer. But you started off with a question about the complexity of Kurdish politics. It is still complex. There is a new candidate for prime minister in Kurdistan. So that process took some time to announce. Now the talks are ongoing between the various political parties. There's a series of meetings tomorrow. And I feel confident that we're inching closer towards some of the issues. What's interesting this time is it's not a discussion about which ministries. Historically, what's happened, the political parties have sat down and they said, I want interior. And somebody says, I want finance. And somebody says, I want oil. And somebody says, I want defense. And somebody... This, for me, this argument is irrelevant. What is the policy of the next government? And that's what we need to discuss at these meetings. What is the vision for the next 4, 8, 12 years, for now? It doesn't matter which ministry, which party gets which ministry. Partnership is not about ministries. And too often in our systems of government, be it in Baghdad or in Kurdistan, we think partnership is the allocation of portfolios. No, it's not. Partnership is, where are you in the decision-making process? Are you involved in the economic decision-making process, the security decision-making process, the political decision-making process, the decision about international relations, domestic relations? Where is everybody in that? And that, I'm happy to see the maturity of Kurdish politics now go beyond the issue of who gets which ministry, but starting to discuss about, so what is our agenda for the next 4 years? And again, I'm optimistic.
One of the complaints that a lot of Kurds have, as you know, is that two families have dominated Kurdish politics for decades. Do you think that will change? And if it will change, when and how will it change?
I think sometimes, I'm going to be honest, sometimes my party gets an unfair reputation. If you look at the leadership structure of my political party, there isn't a Talibani at the head of it right now. So obviously my father, Mam Jalal, he was a national figure, he was an Iraqi figure, he was a Kurdish figure, he was a regional figure, he was a huge charisma. And he had a big shadow. He had a big umbrella, and there was a lot of people under his umbrella. And some of us, obviously, were part of that process. But I think that in the case of the PUK, I can see the next leader of the PUK not being a Talibani. I can see that happening. I can also see the Talibanis, 1, 2, 3 or more, being relevant in the party, having a say in the policies of the party, and continuing the legacy of Mam Jalal, which is, I think, so long as it's the will of the party and the will of the people of the party, and it's through a convention or a congress, then I think it's normal.
And the other family?
Ask them.
Okay. One of the things we've been talking about a lot here is the future of U.S. troops, particularly given that President Trump has said that he wants to keep a big base in Iraq to watch Iran. A lot of question about what that means. We know that in the Kurdistan region, there's a desire to keep the troops here. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if there were a move to get rid of U.S. forces here, how would that affect the Kurdistan region?
Putting aside what President Trump said, how he said it, and in what context he said it, I think that we saw what happened the last times that there was a premature withdrawal of American troops from Iraq. It was clear what happened, and it was not good for Iraq. The vacuum allowed for a group like ISIS to gain foothold in the country and to increase its presence, its territory, and its domination, and its reign of terror on this country. And with all of the valiance of the Iraqi security forces, the Peshmerga forces, the regional security forces, the local people that took up arms, without the assistance of the coalition forces, in particular the United States, the war against ISIS would have taken much longer to eliminate. So I would like to hear from the Iraqi security services about the Iraqi military's readiness, the readiness of the air force, the readiness of the ground force to protect the country from foreign, domestic, terroristic organizations. That's, it's not for me to say. All I can say is the last time there was a premature withdrawal, it didn't end well for Iraq. But at the same time, I think President Saleh said it very quite eloquently this morning, we don't want to be part of somebody else's problem. And there is an agreement for the American troops to be in the country. The agreement is between Iraq and the United States. Their mandate is very clear, and so long as everything stays in that framework, it shouldn't be a problem.
You're kind of in the middle of a lot of people's problems. There's Syria and Rojava, Syrian Kurds. There's Turkey. What should happen, what will happen with Turkey and the incursions? The PUK has been cracking down on the PKK, arresting supporters, closing down groups. What's the way forward with Turkey?
I think, you know, we're living in a very interesting neighborhood. And Turkey is a very important neighbor for Kurdistan, for Iraq. Turkey is a huge trading partner for Iraq and the Kurdistan region, as is Iran, as I hope one day Syria will be as well. There is undoubtedly a Kurdish problem inside Turkey, and the answer and the solution to that problem, we have said all along, is not military. The answer and the solution to the Kurdish problem in Turkey is political. It's through dialogue, it's through understanding, and it's through addressing the core concerns of the various components of the country, as it is here, Iran, and elsewhere. So whenever there is violence, there is undoubtedly a knock-on effect, and it causes all kinds of problems. So we're hopeful that we can enter into an era of peace in Turkey between Turks and Kurds. There was a glimmer of hope a few years back that was regrettably squandered.
You are quite an optimist.
I think it's genetic.
Okay, we're going to take questions from the audience now. If there's a microphone that will go around, and anyone with a question, if you could please just state your name first. Sorry, does anyone have their hand up? There is. Sorry, we'll bye. We will start in the middle because that's where the microphone is going, and then work our way back. Thanks.
السلام عليكم. شكرا أستاذ قوباد على هذه المعلومات اللطيفة. يعني احنا حضرتك ركزت بشكل جميل جدا هو على أنه يجب أن نهتم بالبرنامج السياسي. Not translating? It's okay?
تفضل.
اوكي شكرا. حضرتك ركزت على انه يجب ان يكون اهتمام بالبرنامج السياسي ماذا والرؤيه للمجموعه التي يعني تاخذ المنصب الفلاني، مثلا وزاره العدل هنالك اشكاليه من سياخذها اي حزب. حضرتك ركزت على انه ماذا سيقوم ماذا سيقدم يعني للعراق او لكل العراقيين من خلال هذه الوزاره، ولكن احنا تعودنا على ان يكون هنالك تركيز على لمن هذه الوزاره، كيف ستحلون هذه الاشكاليه؟ يعني بين طموحكم وبين ما هو موجود على الواقع. كيف سيتم حل هذه الإشكالية بين أنه نريد أن يكون هنالك من هذه الوزارة من يحتلها أو من يأخذها، كيف سيقوم بإدارتها، ما هي خطته المستقبلية، وبين أنه لا، هذه من حصة الكتلة الفلانية ويجب أن تأخذها سواء كان قدمت أو لم تقدم. كيف ستحلون هذه الإشكالية؟ شكرا.
That's an easy one. Yes, let's try it one on one.
It takes leadership. And if there's leadership and there is a focus on the issues, a focus on the policies, a focus on the vision, then it doesn't matter who the minister is and which party the minister belongs to. But if there is no vision, if there is no policy, if there is no roadmap, then people are going to fight over the ministry because they think this ministry might bring them prestige, might bring them an opportunity to make some money, might bring them an opportunity to have the perks of minister, to travel, and then it becomes the wrong reason to have a ministry. The real reason to have a ministry is to carry out the policies of the government. And this becomes very difficult in a society like Iraq's, where, what is the policy of the government? Whose policy are we implementing? I remember once the spokesman for Iraq, I think it was Ali Dabagh, several years ago, I felt sorry for him. I saw him in Washington and I said, I really feel sorry for you, because you have to be the spokesman for the government of Iraq. But which government? Whose spokesman are you? How can you answer a question and reflect the policy of the government of Iraq when the government is so fractured along ethnic and sectarian and party lines? So if the framework that formed the government came up with a judicial policy, this is how we're going to reform the judiciary, this is the role of the courts in society, this is the role of the prosecutor generals in society, then it's the minister's job to execute that policy. And that's what's missing from the debate on government formation, because people are saying, I want to be part of the system, I'd like this ministry. Well, that is not going to solve our problems, unfortunately.
Thank you. There was, first of all, a hand raised over there, back in the back. Maybe we should take a couple of questions at a time. So let's take 2 questions at a time. The microphone's there, so we'll start with you. Yeah. Is there another microphone? Sorry, I think we need you on the microphone for the translation. There we go.
مساء الخير، شكرا لكم. أنا سالار محمود، مستشار رئاسة الجمهورية. شكرا للأخي وصديقي العزيز الأستاذ قوباد طالباني، نائب رئيس حكومة إقليم كردستان. شكرا لتلك الصورة التي من الإقليم كردستان وصلتها إلى بغداد. في الآونة الأخيرة قرر مجلس النواب العراقي موازنة البلد. مشكورا تم تثبيت حصة إقليم كردستان من تلك الموازنة، وأيضا هناك داخل بنود الموازنة بعض التزامات الذي أقرها مجلس النواب العراقي على حكومة الإقليم كردستان. هل حكومة إقليم كردستان ملتزم بتلك الإجراءات أو لا؟ شكرا لكم.
Thank you for that. So you've got that one, and then we'll go to another question. There was, yes, sorry, in the middle, and then we'll come back. And you had a question, I know.
No. I'm Cameron Palani from Mary. I have 2 quick questions. One is related to
Can you so
One.
on one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For some years, the presence of a strategic agreement between KDP and PUK managed to shape their relations and sometimes disagreements. As now it's no longer working, what formula do you think they should follow for the future?
Okay, great. And let's take one more, and then we'll get Quoubad to answer. Where is the microphone at the moment? We're just going to go to the front row because you had asked a question first, and then we'll come back to you for the next one, okay? Thank you.
مساء الخير. عماد الخفاجي. سؤال لي الأستاذ قوباد. أتفق معك. حضرتك قلت أن مطالب الناس الجمهور اختلفت، لم تعد مطالب ضد أشخاص معينين أو أحزاب معينة، أصبحت مطالب يعني جماعية تتحدث عن خبز، عن توفير فرص جيدة، فرص عمل، أشياء كثيرة يتمنونها. هذا تفهم جيد، لكن على الأرض إن كان في البصرة أو في أربيل، على الأرض عندما يقومون بهذا الفعل الذي ربما يشبه ما يحدث في باريس الآن، يواجهون برد فعل لا يتفق مع ما تقول حضرتك، مع هذا التفهم الذي لديك لشرعية مطالب هؤلاء الناس. ماذا نحتاج؟ يعني الجهة الأمنية التي تواجههم بشكل يعتقد أن هذه المطالب ليس من حق هؤلاء الناس أن يعبروا عن مطالبهم بهذا الشكل. هل هي المشكلة في الجهة الأمنية أم هنالك ربما لدى السياسيين الآخرين كذلك اعتقاد أن هؤلاء خونة ويريدون تخريب البلد بدل أن نتفهم أنهم يطالبون بحقوقهم؟
It's an interesting question. Do you want to tackle those?
Thank you. So, I think the first question was on the budget, right? The budget was a good exercise, a good parliamentary exercise where especially the Kurdistani factions, despite the difficulties and the differences that we have in Kurdistan, were able to unify and present a common position, and the coordination between our parliamentarians in Baghdad and the KRG in Erbil was very good. It was a very good exercise in what happens when there is coordination, what happens when there is unity. And the intent of this budget law, niyat, the kind of the message in this budget law was very different to the one in 2018. The 2018 budget, when we looked at it, was basically a warning. You do this, otherwise we're going to do this. You do this, otherwise we're going to cut this. If you don't do this, we'll cut this. It wasn't a budget, it was a set of threats. This budget looks more like a budget and looks like something that is tangible, that is attainable, that is implementable. Now, again, for the last 4 years, the Iraqi budget has been an academic exercise. Let's hope that this budget actually translates into something executable. We will be committed to our share of the budget because we feel that we were part of the drafting process, we were part of the ratification process. This didn't happen in spite of us. This wasn't imposed on top of us like in previous years. This was done, hard work. Your colleagues and others from all of the different factions and blocs came and passed this budget. It's not perfect, but the 2019 budget for us is better than the 2018 budget. I'm hopeful that the 2020 budget will be better than the 2019 budget, and we can start to actually use the budget as the tool to build the trust that's missing in this country. Regarding the strategic agreement between the KDP and PUK, yes, for many years there was a strategic agreement, and in the last few years this agreement has kind of fizzled out. The reality is, and it kind of goes back to Jane's question at the beginning, Kurdistan needs the KDP and PUK to cooperate in terms to govern Kurdistan. It will need this. We are not at the stage where one party can rule Kurdistan, no matter how many seats one party gets or the other party gets. This is not a situation where you can say, well, I won and you lost, so I'm going to win, I'm going to run and you have to be the opposition. This won't happen in Kurdistan. We need a new strategic agreement. We need a new framework that goes beyond these 4 years. This is not a duopoly where we just carve up everything between us, but this is an understanding on what are the security threats to Kurdistan and to Iraq. What should be the economic policy for Kurdistan and also for Iraq? This is what the KDP and PUK now are talking about. This is what needs to happen and be cemented for there to be effective governance in Kurdistan and, in my opinion, effective governance in Iraq. But again, I like the tone of the discussions because we're talking more about strategic issues, less about these little tactical issues that have always been a problem. So we need a new formula and, in my opinion, a new framework. And it doesn't have to be limited to the PUK and KDP, because there are other parties now that also can contribute and should, in my opinion, contribute to governance in Kurdistan. Ahmad, I wasn't quite sure about your question, but I think that there are demonstrations, and then there are demonstrations, and then there is chaos. And it's clear who's demonstrating because they have a grievance. When teachers went on strike in Kurdistan, they went on strike because they were not getting their salaries. They were within their rights to go on strike. And we had hours and hours and hours of discussions with the unions and with the associations and with different teacher groups to get them to go back to work. But I don't understand how trying to blow up a power station is expressing your grievance against the government. That, for me, is where a right of a citizen to express his or her grievance transcends into breaking of the law. You cannot, in any country, in the most democratic country in the world, go and, because you don't like the government, try to blow up a power station. This is what happened in 2016-17 in the demonstrations last December. People went to Chamchamal to try to blow up the power station. Well, this power station is connected to a gas pipe that is connected to a gas field. So we could have had a humongous human catastrophe had that have succeeded. Now, if there was some heavy-handed approach by the security services to prevent people from blowing up a power station, then I'm sorry. But that's not demonstrating. That, you know, the burning of government buildings and the burning of public property. You can burn political party office, you know, it's not gonna, that's not a problem. You know, I think it's wrong. I don't think you should express your disapproval this way, but trying to burn hospitals and power stations and things like that. This was, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there was political involvement in this. And this was trying to take the rights away from people who had legitimate grievances and take it over into a very illegitimate sphere, which is terrorism, which is against law. And listen, I grew up in Great Britain. I spent 12 years in the US. I've lived democracy. I've tasted democracy, and I value democracy, and I can relate to democracy. But nobody can go and try and, you know, blow up a power station in the US because they're unhappy with the government. You'll get hit hard by the US police force if you try to do that in the United States. So I think we have to make a clear distinction between what is a demonstration and what is chaos.
That's a really important issue. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes, please, go ahead. Where is the microphone? Thank you.
يشتغل. شكرا كقوباد. أنا آلة طالباني، عضو مجلس نواب، عضو لجنة العلاقات الخارجية. حقيقة عندي سؤالين لكقوباد. الأول، المرحلة الحالية تشهد تحسن جيد في العلاقة بين حكومة إقليم كردستان والحكومة الاتحادية فيما يتعلق بتمثيل حكومة إقليم كردستان في الخارج، والمكاتب الموجودة الآن اللي هي مكاتب حكومة إقليم كردستان. يمكن كقوباد أكثر واحد متابع، وهناك يعني في الفترة الماضية كان إغلاق لبعض هذه المكاتب بسبب ربما الأزمة المالية. وفق الدستور العراقي يحق لحكومات الأقاليم أن يكون لها ممثلين داخل السفارة العراقية في كل دول العالم. فألم يحن الوقت أعتقد لحكومة إقليم كردستان أن يطبقوا هذه المادة من الدستور، بدل أن يكون هناك مكاتب لإقليم كردستان وهناك مصاريف وكذا، أن يكون هناك ممثل لحكومة إقليم كردستان داخل السفارة العراقية في أي دولة بها سفارة العراقية، وسيكون العدد أكثر. هذا سؤالي الأول. سؤالي الثاني بما يتعلق بالقانون الموجود الآن في مجلس النواب العراقي، وهو مقترح قانون من 52 عضو مجلس نواب قدموا به لتنظيم موضوع بقاء القوات الأمريكية من عدمها من خروجها إلى آخره. فيما لو تم تمرير هذا القانون، سيلتزم حكومة إقليم كردستان بما جاء بهذا القانون، لأن الدستور يقول قوانين الاتحادية ليست بالضرورة أن تطبق في كردستان. كردستان أتى إقليم وأتى برلمانها الخاص، وما يتعارض من القوانين بين الإقليم والبرلمان الاتحادي فالأحقية والأولوية لقوانين الإقليم. شكرا جزيلا.
And the gentleman in the middle, sorry, we'll come back to you.
عفوا.
Please.
سؤال السيد قوباد، أحمد كتاب من كركوك، بأنه ذكر الأستاذ سيد قوباد طالباني بأنه مؤامرة على الأوضاع الأحوال اللي صار في شمال. الشارع دا يسأل بأنه تأخير الحكومة سواء في إقليم كردستان أو في العراق، تأخيرهم في توفير الخدمات اللي يعني الشارع بدأ ما يصدق، يعني مو فد مشكلة كبيرة يعني مدى تنحل، بأنه تأخيرهم في توفير الخدمات أدى إلى غضب الشعب، مثل ما يحدث الآن في فرنسا من غضب الشعب ونزولهم للشوارع. وشكرا.
Was that question? Okay.
شكرا.
And sorry, let's just take one more. Yes.
فراس الكرباسي من النجف الأشرف. أستاذ قوباد، طبعا نشكر ملتقى الرافدين على هذا الحدث العراقي المهم. أنا لدي سؤالين. السؤال الأول فيما يتعلق بالجانب الثقافي، هناك كثير من الطلبات بين حكومة إقليم كردستان والمحافظات في الوسط والجنوب. لابد أن نتحرك على جانب ثقافي، جانب إعلامي بين الشعبين الكردي والعربي. هناك مطالبات كبيرة للشعب الكردي لابد أن يعرفها الشعب العربي في وسط وجنوب العراق، وأيضا هناك مطالبات أو أمور لوسط وجنوب العراق لابد أن يتفهمها الإخوان الكرد. ليس القضية قضية سياحة، القضية قضية ثقافة، إقامة مؤتمرات وندوات ومهرجانات شعرية وأدبية مهمة بين الإقليم وبين محافظات وسط وجنوب العراق. هذا السؤال الأول. ما هو رأي حكومتكم في تفعيل هذا الجانب لفترة عام 2019؟ السؤال الثاني، الجانب التجاري جانب مهم بين الإقليم وبين محافظات وسط وجنوب العراق. هل هناك حركة تبادل تجارية، وكم هي نسبتها بين الإقليم وبين وسط وجنوب العراق؟ نحن نعلم أن كثير من منتجات الإقليم تصل إلى البصرة وإلى النجف وإلى كربلاء، لكن هل هناك تبادل تجاري بحيث منتجات النجف والبصرة تدخل إلى الإقليم؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. I'm just going to say if anyone has two questions, Quoubad has the right to answer the one that he wants. So go ahead.
Just to say, to prove that there is no favoritism in the PUK, and because Allah is my dear cousin, I will only answer one of her questions, not two, to prove that this is democracy, and I will be fair. And I will choose the easier one to answer, which is to do with the KRG missions and the diplomatic missions abroad. I think that there is a formula to work it out, and it is not uncommon. When I was in the United States, Scotland had a representation outside of the British Embassy. The head of the Scottish office didn't tell the British ambassador every day what he was doing and who he was seeing and how he was seeing it, but it functioned, it worked, and I would meet the Scottish representative regularly, and occasionally I would see the British ambassador, and I was saying, how does this work? Can we, for me, it was the most obvious example of how we can incorporate the KRG offices, not necessarily inside the building of the embassies, but within the framework of the diplomatic corps of Iraq. And thankfully, during my time, I had a good relationship with the Iraqi embassy and with the various Iraqi ambassadors that were there. I was in the US for a long time. But I've seen in countries it depends so much on the personalities of the KRG rep and the Iraqi ambassador. If they get on well, the system works. If they don't get on well, they completely undermine each other. And it is not impossible to resolve, and I think it's good. It makes Iraq's representation, I think, more rich, more diverse, and it doesn't have to be limited to the Kurdistan region. We can have all kinds of other attachés that represent various interests, and I think it's a very good observation. I think it's something that, again, shouldn't be too complicated to work on, and thank you for asking those two questions, and I only choose that one to answer.
You dodged the one about the military presence.
Yes. Mr. Ahmed, regarding Chamchamal, I didn't say there was a conspiracy in Chamchamal. I was saying that people tried to blow up the power station in Chamchamal, and in my opinion, no matter how upset you are with your government, you shouldn't carry out an action that would leave millions of people with even less power than they have. There's never a justification for destroying public property in that way. Go against the mayor, go against the governor, come against the KRG, come and express your grievances, don't vote for us next time. There's a whole host of things that can happen, but blowing up a power station is never one that should be thought of as appropriate. Ustaz Firas, regarding the cultural side of things, I think it's absolutely necessary, because look, I haven't been to Baghdad for a long time, in a really long time. I come and go very quickly for one meeting and then I leave, but I've been here one day now and I've met dozens of old friends and I've interacted with a whole host of people. And then, I'll come back again and I'll keep coming back, and people are coming from Baghdad to Kurdistan. And one of the things that made me most happy about this trip really was before, when a Kurdish delegation would come to Baghdad, the news would go crazy. Delegation from Kurdistan has come to Baghdad. Now it's normal, because it should be normal. And when delegations from Baghdad come to Slaymaniyah or Erbil, it should be normal. It shouldn't be news. That should not make news. And this is what we need to get to. Now, you take the politicians out of it, you bring athletes up, you bring poets up, artists up, actors, mathematicians, people with hobbies. You connect people on a people-to-people level, and we'll realize, oh my God, these Kurds, they're okay. They're nice people. Oh my God, look at this. You start to realize that at the end of the day, aside from the political identity and the ethnic identity and the religious identity and the political ideology, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And there's a reason why we behave the way we behave. And the more social interaction there is at a cultural level, I think the healthier the society should become. And this shouldn't just apply to Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq, by the way. This is a problem within Kurdistan. Because I always ask, how many times does somebody from Duhok interact with somebody from Halabja? They don't. Where do they interact? Before, the medical system was such that there would be rotations, the education system would be such that there was rotations, the military was an area where people would unify. Now even that doesn't happen. So even within Kurdistan, the crossing of paths of people from Duhok to Halabja, to Germian, to Raparin, to Sleimaniyah, to Erbil, the interaction is vital. And realize that we're not just a country full of politicians and political analysts and people who are interested in politics. This is, there's a story that happened to me, which it was funny, but it also broke my heart at the same time. In 2015, we were in the middle of the 5-party talks between KDP, PUK, Goran, the Islamic group, the Islamic Union, on what to do with the issue of the presidency. And I was in Sleimaniyah having a discussion with a group of intellectuals, and after my meeting I said goodbye and I walked away, and a little child grabbed my arm, pulled on me, and I turned around and there's a little kid, and the little kid looked at me and he said, "So what are you going to do? Are you going to extend his term?" Meaning, are you going to extend the term of the presidency? And I looked at this kid and I said, "How old are you?" And he said, "I'm 9. I said, what do you care? I said, "Go away. I said, worry about PlayStations, Spider-Man or something. What's it to you who the president of Kurdistan is?" And this showed me that this is a problem. 9-year-olds shouldn't worry about these things. 9-year-olds shouldn't be political analysts. They should be having fun. They should be doing what 9-year-olds do, which is play and fight and throw things at each other and break windows and what every 9-year-old, well, that's what I used to do when I was 9 anyway. I wasn't. And so this cultural integration, I think, can help us get away from politics. Because so long as politics is everything we think about, it's a very unhealthy society if everybody all day thinks about politics. So regarding trade, now you did ask 2 good questions, so I will answer your second question. One of the biggest mistakes we can make in Kurdistan is to think that the market for domestic production in Kurdistan is only Kurdistan. I always tell businesses, you have a market of 40 million people. Your product, whether it's cement, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's plastics, whether it's textiles, whatever it is they're producing, don't think of this little area of Kurdistan. Market it to Basra, market it to Anbar, market it to Baghdad. This is a market. Think big, and vice versa. And I think the more we can think of this as an integrated market that could stretch into Turkey and into Iran and into Syria and into Jordan, the better Iraq can become at no longer only being a consumer. Because that's all we do. We buy things and we sell things. But we have the possibility to produce so much here and to become owners of our own production in every field, in agriculture, in industry, in petrochemicals, in oil and gas. But where is it? Look at what's coming across the border. Look at trade in and trade out, and you will see a major disparity between the volume of substandard, poor quality stuff that is somehow passing quality control and coming into Iraq, and what is going out. And that, if we can look at this country as one market, and look at the region as an integrated market, there is enormous potential for growth. And you know what? The more factories we have, the more people we employ, the more people the private sector employs, the less people the government needs to employ. The more people the private sector employs, the more product there is. The richer the private sector can become, and guess what? The more the government can tax the private sector. So it's a completely win-win situation. But this requires a vision that goes beyond what ministry do I get. This is what I talk about when I say, forget the ministry. Have the vision. Talk about the market, talk about the economy, talk about the integration, talk about the potential and opportunities, and do it. And let's hope this government does it.
Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing that vision take shape. I'm really sorry we didn't get to more questions, but we have to end. And thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Qubad.
Thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you to the Rafadain Center for Dialogue for this wonderful forum. Thank you and good night. Just back there.